I think the story started when, in terms of things that influenced me, when my grandfather came to the UK in the early 30s, and he was a landless, poor person in the Punjab, never been outside of India, wasn't educated, ended up in Somerset, and was going door to door with a bicycle selling to the farming community. Now, if you look at that as a challenge compared to my challenge, it's greater by a factor of 10 at least. So strange food, wet weather, not being able to speak, having to buy and sell to the farming community. So he did that, and then he graduated to having a van, and then we opened a shop, a drapery store. So my whole upbringing was involved in trading, and even when he was going door to door in the van, I used to go with him in the school holidays. So I've never not been involved in buying and selling. So that was the initial start.
And your parents did the markets, didn't they?
We started doing the markets when I was about 17, and we were again selling overalls and Wellington boots and agricultural things, and then that was all a bit boring. So around that time, the East End started to develop to start making fashion. So the old model of fashion was that an agent would go to a store 6 months ahead of a season, you'd order it and it would come in 6 months later. And what started to happen was in the East End, product was produced and put on the rails, and you could go up every week and replenish it. So that was the beginning of, we started doing that in the markets, and that was the reason that New Look, the first New Look store, was very successful, because you could replenish on a weekly basis and not have to predict 6 months forward. So that was, so I would claim I was the first fast fashion retailer.
So you set up the first shop. How did it sort of roll out from there?
Well, Weymouth was what I regard as the first shop, because the first shop in Taunton was funded with a loan from my parents. So after a year, I gave them the shop and moved on to Weymouth. So I paid off the loan by giving them the shop. When I opened Weymouth, it was immediately successful. It's a holiday town, and we opened the doors and it just took off. What was the question?
Well, how did you expand? How did you grow?
We just went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, 20, like that. So basically at that time I was my wife was in the shop. I would leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the East End of London with cash, buy the product, pick it up, drive back, unload it, and then distribute it to the other shops. So, and that was a part-time job.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do with the rest of the day? But again, when we met, when the company was quite a bit bigger, I think Tom was about the hardest working person I've ever worked with. It was very common. I lived in Windsor, so he'd drive up from Weymouth, pick me up at Windsor, and he picked me up at Windsor at 7:30, so he'd been on the road for 2 hours by then. We're coming to London and start harassing suppliers. And his interviewing technique was easy. Again, his communications had never been particularly forthcoming. But it worked brilliantly, because we used to go into suppliers in the morning and they'd say, "Oh, hello, Tom." And he'd say, "We've got these amazing jeans. We've got, Wales, we've got 60 dozen jeans. We'll give them to you for £11. And he'd go, okay, £8. And he'd go, "All right, £6." And he'd say, "All right, but," and he wasn't he wasn't listening at all. He'd say, all right, but where can I get breakfast?" But
if you'd got up at 4 o'clock, you'd be worried about breakfast as well.
So I mean, just jumping forward, why do you think New Look was successful when a lot of people around failed at the time? Well, how did you?
Well, it was adapting to the fast fashion model and not buying product 12 months ahead, which consumers didn't like. There was nothing you could do. So the model was, if we would trial a lot of things, if it worked, we'd get more. If it didn't work, we'd mark it down. So,
but ruthlessly. Like within days, if it wasn't selling. If you're not sold a couple in the first few days, it just discount it and get rid of it. Usually still at a profit. How have you remained competitive? I mean, let's jump forward. When you started, there was no Zara, there was no none of the Inditex brands, there was no Forever 21. How have you managed to stay competitive in the context of this overcrowded market?
And the internet.
And the internet, yeah.
It's getting tougher and tougher. I mean, all the competition is getting more responsive and doing most of the things that we were doing. So you just have to be sharper, understand the customer better, give them exactly what they want when they want it. So it's just a constant struggle. So I'm glad I'm not in the core of the business fighting that fight, but currently as a non-exec, where I can pretend, well, I look at strategy rather than actually having to do it.
Freudian slip, man.
What did I say?
Freudian slip showing there. Why did you choose to go public in the first place in '98?
The background of the business was that my parents were in Somerset, I was in Weymouth in Dorset. They built up a chain of 20, 25 stores, and I built up a chain of 20 or 25, and we put them together. So they felt their half of what they'd built was for their children. They wanted to make sure their children were well looked after. So I had the responsibility of being in the fashion business, which can be fairly precarious, but also being the guardian of what they wanted to leave to my brothers and sisters. And I wanted to get rid of that. So we tried to float the company, that failed, and then we had private equity investment.
It's interesting, we failed to float the first time. There's a whole raft of reasons, but it was instructive. Our bankers, who were supposed to have underwritten the float, came to us the night before and said, we're not going to get it away at 180 million, we want to do it at whatever it was, 130. And we said, we'll discount the close, but we're not discounting the company. Pull it. And it literally was the night before, wasn't it? They were shocked. So we got this dinner for all the senior management booked, and I don't know, the Ritz or somewhere, so we had it at McDonald's instead. And what happened after that? Because the venture capitalists came in then, didn't they?
Private equity came in, they spent time with the company, they liked what they saw, and they made what was a very successful investment.
Yeah, and floated second time around very successfully. You floated the company. What was the experience, positive and negative?
You were going to ask me about why. I answered it. So the reason we got investment in, not because we needed it, but I wanted the money. So to get security for my parents. I don't have a problem with private equity or floating. You take the money, you have to live by the rules of the people who've given you the money. So obviously, if you're a floated company, you have to report, and you have to run. The governance has to be very strong. I don't have any issues with any of that. We ran the company in a way that it was run in a way that a floated company would be run anyway.
Yeah, we had two choices. Most companies would have really, reined everything in, stopped spending, cut expenses, all the rest of it. And yeah, we did a bit of that. But what we decided to do, because of the problems in the market, we were offered shops that we could previously not get. We didn't have a good covenant. So there's a lot of empty shops on the market. So we'd always, because the family had got close connections with many of its suppliers, who were still suppliers after all these years, and the company always used to pay on time, it would honour its agreements, it was very flexible on everything. We expanded our way out of a recession, which is almost unheard of. So we accelerated the opening rate of the shops. We've been doing 20, 25 a year, which is a lot, a shop every 2 weeks. We revved it up to be doing 70 and 80 and relied on the suppliers to supply the stock on extended credit. We'd fit the shops out as cheaply as possible. We had, we figured out a rail system that was cheap, the lighting system that was cheap, everything. And we'd open these shops, and we were getting return on capital in some cases 6 weeks, 12 weeks. So each shop was fueling 3 or 4. Even the bad ones, we were getting 6 months out return on capital. So that was 2 shops. And we just ploughed the money back in, and it worked. I mean, it came back later that we had to refit a lot of shops because they were terrible. But it just shows that the customer really wanted a lot of choice and great prices and newness the whole time.
So the reason why Gavin knows a lot more detail about what went on is that I was never CEO, never actually led the company in that way, and I only focused on product. So all the other stuff I wasn't particularly interested in, because if you get the product right, the company's successful. So when I went back into the company 2 or 3 years ago with, because it was struggling, I became CEO for a month, and I said, and everybody was coming to me with their problems and me having to make decisions, and I said, I was relieved of that duty, and I was very happy not to be the ultimate decision maker. Happy to be involved in strategy, but not get involved in distribution, warehousing, retail, operations, all of those sorts. I'm not interested, just totally product.
Well, he says that, but the truth is that we used to have offices, we were a joint manager director, we used to have offices next to each other. And we got some consultants in to do a 360-degree management thing, you'll all know about it. And they came back and said, people love the company, they love working for the company, they love you guys and all the rest of it, and it's a big success. But there's a problem that if they come to Tom, they get one answer, and then they come to me to get another answer. So we said, well, stop coming to both of us. But if you do, and this was the culture of the company, if you do, and you get 2 different answers, it's then your responsibility to make the decision, and we'll back you. And that open culture, I think, was again a very unusual aspect, even down to like we go to the pub after work every night and play shoot pool with the warehouse boys, and everybody could say anything without fear or favour. So we heard very early about any problems that were brewing, and Tom was very visible in the company, as was I. But everyone knew he was the boss and the owner, but everybody knew they could go to him with anything. So
a lot of people are reticent about coming up with things that can be improved, and feel that you take it the wrong way. I love people saying, look, this is not right, this is not working, because it's an opportunity to fix it and improve it. So that was the reason why it was an open culture, and anybody in buying this, when you look at a garment, there's all sorts of opinions of whether it's going to sell or not, and everybody had a chance to voice what they felt.
The family office that you've developed, why did you start it? What do you do with it? And maybe touch on the philanthropic side as well.
So the family office, well, it's about, as I stepped back from New Look, I started looking at new things that I knew nothing about, particularly interested in e-commerce, internet, looking to the future. So I made lots of not-for-profit investments. They were supposed to make money, but they turned out not making any money.
They transferred to not-for-profit.
So it's a big learning curve of having spent around 35, 40 years focused on one business. I was very interested in looking at other things. So in terms of the family office, I'm very interested in social impact. My younger brother, who's a broadcaster and a writer, is focused on straight giving. I'm more interested in social impact. So over 2 or 3 years, you help an organization become more commercial, and become self-sufficient. I think capitalism is a very powerful tool, has its negatives, but to create positive income and well-being for people who don't have very much. So that's my particular interest. So I like the idea of improving agriculture, mainly focused in India. So if you can keep people on the land and give them a living, then they don't have to move to the city and experience all the negatives that happen in urban areas that are so overcrowded with education, water, empowering women. So those are the sort of areas that the Family Office looks at.
There are lots and lots of charities around. I'm really interested in why you support the British Asian Trust.
I think the due diligence and the work that's done is great, and it connects UK with the Indian subcontinent. So the combination of the two fit very well with what I was already doing, mainly focused in India.